feel like I've hit record on everything. God bless me if I didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode number 4. We have John Chesney here. We used to improvise together.
We did, yeah.
So we've known each other for quite a while from the improv scene.
Yep.
He is now in the world of, deep into the world of whiskeys. Maybe you always were deep into the world of whiskeys.
I'm a much deeper whiskey operative now than I was when we first met.
Oh, okay. So you're super deep.
Oh, yeah.
And a podcaster himself.
Yep.
The We Can Do Better podcast?
Yes, sir.
Is it just one?
What do you mean?
Just one podcast? You have a side podcast?
You gotta get all your side hustle out there. At the beginning of lockdown, I had a different podcast called Quarantine Life. So this is my second actual podcast, but Quarantine Life is, I don't know, it might be over.
Can you still find it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So both of those things.
Yep.
And if you're watching this and you see like a certain glimmer in our eyes and you're like, I think those two have kissed before. We most certainly have.
Yep.
I think I've kissed everyone on our previous improv team, which now I've changed my tune about that.
You're anti-kissing?
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, fair.
A few years ago, I got real nervous. And this is not against anyone who has herpes, because most people do. But I was just like, I don't want to get herpes. I don't have it. That I know of yet.
Right.
And I was just like, I just hit the brakes real hard. I feel like I used to kiss everybody in every improv scene.
Well, I think that's interesting because I think, right now we're still kind of in some kind of a lockdown, but
if you're listening in the future, we're in a pandemic.
We're in a pandemic. The world has gone to hell. We're basically living in Gotham City in The Dark Knight Rises. Like, that's what we're living through right now.
That's pretty good.
But when you're on an improv team, especially when we were going through it, it's like you're kind of going through lockdown with that group of people. And as long as you're in that circle of trust, everything's cool.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there was ever any question about kissing. It was just like, well, yeah, like we're all in lockdown together. It's us against the world.
We have to kiss.
Yeah, it's part of the deal.
Also, it's like always good I feel like no matter if it's a guy kissing a guy or a guy kissing a girl, it always just like builds the tension and everyone's like, oh my God, they kissed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, we're going to work that whenever we can.
Just doing our part.
And the last title I forgot to give Chesney is he's also the mayor of Shelbyville.
Oh, yeah. So on our podcast, We Can Do Better, it's a Chicago-centric podcast. We definitely like to talk about like food and drink, but there's also a lot of shit that is amiss in the city. So in the podcast, my partner basically turns the tables on me.
His partner, D.
Yep.
Who's phenomenal.
Durandal Beverly. Almost
better than Chesney is in it.
Well, hold on. He's not even here right now. You don't need to like feed his ego. So we do a segment called Mayor Chesney where he presents me with issues that are happening in the city and I answer them as if I'm the mayor of this town, Shelbyville, and how I would handle those situations. But of course, in the world of Shelbyville, everything's awesome. We live under a bubble, and we're protected from everything that's been happening. And we're financed by Shelby Coin, which is off the blockchain, and we're doing fine.
Heck yeah. Speaking of Shelby Coin, I now own like $80 US dollars of Bitcoin.
Ooh.
So I'm in deep into those electric coins now, so deep.
Yeah. Are you new to
it's like 0.001.
Oh, yeah.
Like of a Bitcoin. I am new to it.
It's exciting. It's fun.
It is fun. It's fun to watch the graph go up and down, especially when I don't have a lot riding on it.
It definitely fluctuates a lot. And as it gets bigger, like right now, I think Bitcoin is worth 11,400, something around there. And so on an average day, it might lose $100 in value. And you're like, oh my God, that's so much money.
Yeah.
And then it'll go back up 200. You're like, I'm in the money.
Yeah. I put in like right at the beginning of the pandemic, it was down to like 4,000 or something. Mm-hmm. And I was like, put in $20.
Oh, nice.
So I doubled my money.
Hell yeah.
I wish I would have put in more now.
I guess
that's how it goes.
Putting some money, like just like some of my side hustle money into it.
Fun.
Throughout the past year. And then when the pandemic hit and all the markets dropped, the crypto world definitely dropped too. So I started throwing in more money into Ethereum and Litecoin, and all of that I've put in over the past year has more than doubled. But it's exciting. But also, yesterday it dropped 10%. So I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, I have real low stakes. So you guys, I'm so excited because John Chesney here brought some whiskeys, and you have a business right now.
Yeah.
Do you have a name for this business?
So we call it I refer to it as the Chief Whiskey Officer, or myself as the Chief Whiskey Officer. I'm that on Instagram. I have the LLC around it.
Check it out.
Yep. And so basically what I do is I kind of partner up with corporate entities where it's like banks, or I have a big partnership with a company called Netscope, which does internet security. And they'll bring me on to basically do digital guided whiskey tastings where I just nerd out and be an expert for an hour and talk to people. And sometimes it's really fun, and I just say, here's how we taste this, and here's the provenance of these spirits. And other times it's just guys going, yeah, well, I've got this bottle. And I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah. It's just time for them to show off.
Yep.
I love that. I feel like whiskey's certainly the thing that I would love to get into more, except for the fact that it's more expensive.
It's super expensive.
And it's like you got to be into it, and
here's the advantage of whiskey over wine. When you open a wine bottle, you've got 2-3 days to drink.
You got to kill it. Yep.
You open a whiskey bottle and you're like, this is awesome. I'm going to save this. And you can hold on to it for years and years. As long as it's in a bottle, it's not going to go bad.
Huh.
So one of the bottles that we're drinking today is from 2017. And let's see, the one that we're currently drinking, I believe, is from 2016. So the fact that it's been open for probably, this is definitely from 2016 because I bought this bottle when we first opened Slightly Toasted.
Okay. Yeah. You can just sit on that gold and sip it slowly.
Yeah,
See, I always buy a bottle and I'm like, I got to get through this as fast as I can. But it's like a Trader Joe's $15 bottle.
Yep. That's awesome.
This is also plays to something that I freaking love so much is special drinks, no matter what they are, and cups and vessels. I'm super into it.
You're very much into fun glassware. You make your own glassware, which is really fun.
I make my own stuff out of clay, ceramics. That's what they call it. I make my own stuff out of clay.
I find it easier to drink out of those versus my hands. I love it.
So I'm pumped. What is this that we're trying first?
Yeah. So I have 3 things that we will try today. The first thing we're drinking is from Bell Mead, and Bell Mead is a young distillery. And so when young distilleries start out, they don't just bring off old whiskey off the still. It has to sit around and age for 4 to 5 years to reach some maturity. So what they do is they're buying whiskey from other distilleries. So like MGP, which is a big one out of Indiana, or Dickel sells a lot out of Tennessee.
And everybody's okay with this? This is part of this isn't like stealing someone's joke and being in the comedy world?
Yeah, right? No, it depends on how you present it, right?
Yeah.
If I come over and say, hey, this is our brand, we're starting out this way, and eventually we'll be using our own juice, people are really cool with it.
Because you can't just wait around for 4 years to
have some kind of cash flow. Yeah. Right. So Templeton is an example of a whiskey that put on false airs. When Templeton first came out, they're like, this is authentic Indiana whiskey, the kind that Al Capone used to drink.
Templeton.
And then it turned out that they were buying it from MGP, and they completely denied it. And so people got really upset about it. And so they actually changed the laws so that you have to put you have to put where the whiskey was distilled and where it's bottled.
Okay.
So you can't be a Michigan distillery buying whiskey from Indiana and just claiming that you distilled it and all of a sudden have 12-year whiskey out of nowhere.
That seems good. Transparency,
fair.
especially if you're spending a lot of money on something. You should
totally
know what you're getting.
So what we're drinking is definitely it is MGP whiskey. So whiskey made from a distillery in Indiana.
Misky, he said.
Misky. It is aged 9 years, And a lot of what these young distilleries will do to set themselves apart is they'll finish it in separate barrels. So they'll age it for 9 years in one barrel, and then this one is finished in a sherry cask.
That's so cool.
Isn't that fun? So that's how a lot of distilleries will separate themselves. Angel's Envy is the same exact thing. It is a high rye bourbon finished in port wine casks, and that's really the only thing that's different about it.
I know nothing, so little about whiskeys, but the fact that there's it's exposed to wood makes it so cool.
Yeah, that's where so much of the flavor and the sugar and the sweetness is coming from.
What should I be experiencing as I just tried it for the first time?
Whiskey.
Yes. I'm on the right track. That's what I tasted.
So I don't think there's any wrong thing to taste or try. It's really just about whether or not you like it. Mm-hmm. So this is a pretty soft whiskey. It's 90 proof. The sherry kind of softens up some of those flavors as well. So it's definitely a little sweet in like the early and mid palate, and then kind of finishes somewhat quickly. The sherry is a little lighter than I remember it being, but I think it'll be interesting. I also brought some water so we could drop a couple drops of water into it and see how it opens up or changes once we add some water.
Whiskey, just like being super into anything that's like a drink or like, I used to be really into teas. And like anything that you can get kind of like nuanced with, it's just so fun to like, oh my gosh, it feels so special. It feels just so fun to like, I don't know, get to like try to taste those flavors. And
I'm a fan of being with anybody excited about anything.
Yeah, that's a good rule for life.
Yeah. I remember I was in Seattle during the Super Bowl when the Seahawks were playing the Steelers. And so I was like, I want to go to the biggest, most fun Seattle Seahawks bar. And I had a fucking blast. I got my face painted live on TV, and I told people, I'm like, oh, I'm from Cleveland. I drove all the way out here to be with my Seattle brethren. I'm here, and I'm just loving it. And I had a blast until about the third quarter when they were getting their asses blown out. So then it was like, game over. Get out of there. This is not fun anymore.
I felt the same way when I was studying over in Germany. Like I like totally was like, for 1 month, I love soccer. Mm-hmm. And this is also like literally something I teach in improv classes. Is like one of the easiest tricks in the book that will carry you the majority of the way is just care. Like when you care, other people care, like by default.
Yep.
It's like, think about all the random TED Talks you've watched where it's like the topic really isn't something that would catch your interest, but like the way the person's talking about it, like immediately gets you invested.
I think excitement is contagious and addicting.
Sure. Yep.
We added water. What do you think?
Hold on, let me do it again. I like it better.
So this, I think a lot more of like the sherry and the red fruit comes through a lot more when you add that little bit of water.
Yeah.
It just opens up a lot.
Yeah, it makes sense. I also would feel what's pretty cool about whiskey too is like you get a little bit of like it's a little bit more classy. And I feel like
whiskey's faux classy.
Okay, explain.
So whiskey is something that's always chasing heritage and always wants to be presented as this like noble old spirit that comes from the South and is done the right way. But it's kind of a whole category that's constantly chasing nostalgia. Like they're always, the better times when you can get Pappy Van Winkle on the shelf on an everyday basis. And at that time, we're like, the better times when Colonel Taylor was still out there making whiskey. And when he was around, it was like, the better times when, you could go and get whiskey right out of the barrel at the bar. It's like we're always chasing what it used to be and never just appreciating the moment that we're in.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we don't do that with like... Do we do that with beer? I don't think so. I feel like beer's
a little more current.
Yeah. Like even like the microbrewery scene, it's like a little bit more exciting than the And I love German beers, but a little bit more exciting than the mainstay, like German beers that have been around forever, at least in my book.
I agree with that. I also think that we're kind of in a post-craft brew movement. Like the bubble has been so big, but we're not opening up breweries in the same rate that we were. We're also not as excited about going to breweries in the same way that we used to be.
Yeah.
Like 2 years ago, it was like, well, what are you doing on Saturday? Well, we're going to go like brewery hopping. Like now it's, what are you doing? I don't know. I might go to the same brewery I normally go to, or I won't. It's not as exciting as it used to be.
It's like hummus. Like, I don't think I had hummus till about I was in college.
Yeah. Are you off it? Are you no longer?
No. I'm still into hummus, but like
Okay.
when I first had hummus, I was like, "Have you guys tried hummus?" I didn't even know what it was. It was in a wrap.
Have you heard about this?
It was in a wrap, and they were like, "Yeah." I was like, I asked like, the waitress, and I was like, "What is this?" Hummus. And I think it was getting big right when the microbrewery scene was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now people are like, you go to Costco and you get a tub of hummus. And don't get me wrong, that's great. For $5, a tub of hummus. But, you know.
A tub just seems so large.
It's no problem for me.
All right.
So, Chesney, you've had like a new creative kind of endeavor in your life, which is opening a couple restaurants, right? Mm-hmm. So Slightly Toasted.
Yep.
Little Toasted.
Yep.
And then your latest one, which is...
So we have 2 that we opened up in July of last year. The first is Asadito, which is a taqueria and agave bar. Mm-hmm. So we focus a lot on margaritas, but we have a back bar of about 100 different mezcals and tequilas. And the fourth, which I have the least to do with, because largely my role is that of the beverage director. So like I'm the one who helps develop what these programs look like and how to train people to operate the programs when I'm not there.
Okay.
So everything becomes repeatable. Walking Ball doesn't have as much of an alcohol element, but it had its own challenges. Excuse me. Walking Bao is a Chinese quick casual. We focus on woks, so like stir fry, and baos, which are Asian steam buns that are basically steam bun tacos and delicious.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Wait,
good. How is it done as a taco? Is it like in a taco shell, but it's a steam bun?
No. So the steam buns, like they literally, you cut them open almost like a little bun and then you fill it with protein.
Oh, I see. So, yeah. So it's like you make the bun and then you put the food in it. Mm-hmm. What is the style? What is that when it's like already cooked in the bun? What do they call that?
Hot Pocket.
Not what I was thinking of, but still correct.
Yeah, I am not sure. It sounds like a pot pie or something like that. I'm not exactly sure.
Oh man, I had a pasty. I almost said it wrong. I had a pasty for the first time 2 weeks ago. Do you know what they are? They're
like a pastiche?
I don't know.
Or pastry?
It's called a pasty. Maybe it comes from a bigger word, but they're specific to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
And they're like these like meat pies.
Ooh.
I've wanted them my whole life. And since I was up there biking the other day with my friend Dave.
Yep.
Podcast number 2. They had just like pasty signs everywhere. Don't call them a pasty because that's what you put on your nipples.
Right.
But it's a pasty. And not very good.
All right.
At least the one I had was like not that impressive. I'm a little disappointed because it feels like the perfect recipe for what I love, which is like meats.
Yeah.
Little things you could carry in pockets.
Is it like a phyllo dough or like a biscuit?
I think it's more crusty, and I don't know where it falls. But the whole thing is really dense, like super dense.
Got it.
And I was picturing something like I'd bite into a pocket, and there'd be a little bit of like, there'd still be dense items in there, but some air between the dense items. And it was just like one solid piece from crust through the core to crust.
It sounds like a bad pot pie where it tends to be like dense and kind of one note.
Yeah.
Pot pie is always one of those things where if I hear somebody's making it, I'm like, all right. Like I'm just so disappointed.
Why?
I don't. It's just because I generally think of it as being like cafeteria food. Like when I think of like every pot pie I've had has been like middle school, North Olmsted Middle School cafeteria, and it's like my least favorite meal.
I fucking love pot pies.
Yeah.
The last time I believe I had them was a tragedy. I was like, God, this had to be like a long time ago. It was like the beginning of my college career. I was in a computer lab working, and I brought a pot pie with me to make for my lunch. I don't know why a pot pie.
What, like a 7-Eleven pot pie?
I do like a grocery store pot pie.
Okay.
Pretty standard. But I cooked in the microwave. I took it out. And I think like the exterior was no longer hot, you know, and that was like my test. And like I scooped into it. I took a bite. Dude, it was boiling lava. But this is what happened. You know how like the top of the pot pie is like very like tacky?
Yep.
Well, it adhered to the roof of my mouth.
No.
And you get something hot in your mouth, you bounce it around. I couldn't get it off. And it was scalding lava. And I'm like, I'm in this like computer room in this area where you're allowed to eat.
Just
I'm like,
imagine you like high-pitched screaming in the middle of this like quiet room.
there was a lot of suffering going on in my mouth. And I kid you not, like by the time I got it off and like had water in my mouth, a blister had already formed on the roof of my mouth. And that blister got bigger and bigger for the next couple days, eventually popped in my mouth.
Oh, that's so,
And then
gross.
eventually, as it like decayed, this exterior skin just like dangled from the roof of my mouth.
I hate that.
I think that's the last time I had a pot pie.
Understandably.
But otherwise, I'm a huge fan.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds pretty traumatic.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
My last experience was delicious. Kind of the exact opposite.
I also had it in my head at some point as a kid that like Ninja Turtles also ate pot pies, and so I was always excited about them for that. I don't know. I think my mom said that to me just to get me excited.
She's smart.
Should we move on to another whiskey?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's do it.
So I wanted to ask you this: as we're talking about you getting into the restaurant industry,
Yep.
and putting a lot more focus into whiskey. I mean, you and I started doing improv together probably around the same time in Chicago, 10 or 11 years ago, right? And I'm wondering if like you feel like some of the creative joy you get from performing on stage, or any of the joy, maybe it's not based in the creative joy, but anything that like you feel like applies in the world of comedy and improv that you feel like you get your fix now within the restaurant world or in the whiskey world.
So there are certain things that are similar, but not in that direct way. And I think part of the reason why I wanted to get back into podcasting, get into podcasting, is wanting to find a new creative outlet where I could get my voice out there.
Yep.
With maybe a little more permanence than an improv show. And also something that I can continue to grow and learn from as I'm going.
That's cool.
One of the things that is interesting about the restaurant world is very similar to the improv world is there's a sense of when you go to an improv show and you're like, oh, I love The Reckoning. I always wanted to watch The Reckoning. And then you'd hear, oh, well, two of the guys from The Reckoning joined up with two of the guys from this show, and they're doing their own show. And I'm like, well, shit, that's my Wednesday night. I'm going to watch The Reckoning, then I'm going to watch that show.
It's like Asian-Mexican fusion.
Yeah, you're like, this is incredible. I can't even...
Or like Italian and, Thai.
Like, I couldn't imagine that this kind of a fusion was possible.
Do people do that, Italian and Thai? I don't think so. That sounds actually great. Do they?
I don't know.
Okay.
Well, if you go to Italy, it would just be like Thai fusion.
Yeah, that's true.
But in the restaurant world, there's a lot of that same spirit of partnership and camaraderie. So there's a lot of restaurants that are, say, it's this restaurant group, but then the restaurant group from here partnered up with this bar, and they're doing a collaboration, and they're doing something really cool. And so I like the idea of still being able to participate in creating something cool and on a larger scale, but I look for those opportunities to find partnership and camaraderie, whether it's with other restaurants or breweries or distilleries. So an example being when we opened up Asadito, I really wanted to have its own feel to it, and I wanted to have a Mexican lager, but I didn't want to put in Pacifico or Tecate or something like that on draft. I wanted to partner with a local brewery to do something unique for our bar. So I went to On Tour Brewing, and I said, this is my goal, this is what I'm doing. So myself and the master brewer sat down, and we like drank a bunch of beers, talked about what we liked, what we didn't like, what our goals were for the beer. And we ultimately came up with Como Se Dice, which was kind of a riff on one of their lagers, but a little more sessionable. And that beer became the Mexican lager on draft at Asadito, but it also had a home at each of the other stores too. So no matter where you were, you could get that beer as long as you're within our restaurant group.
That's so cool. I would say like there's a little bit of an analogy, not only with like you're doing something collaborative, which is like the very spirit of improv, which is so fun and exciting, but also like you're doing something a little niche too, that only like a small audience like might know and really appreciate really well. Right. Like it's so funny, like the amount of improv like shows we've seen and like how we could talk about people like legends and like how many people know that.
Right.
300, 500 people. Like, you know, it's so niche. There's something fun about that, right? Where it's like something that's quality, but also like you got to be deeply invested in a small like world to get to know it.
100%. And I think it's something that I really loved. And I, in the moment, was like, oh my God, I can't believe that everyone doesn't know who these people are. But also now I really appreciate the fact that no one knew who they were, but we did.
Yeah.
And there's something cool about that moment.
Yeah.
And I don't like, even if I don't think that I would go back into that world, because I think like it existed for me for a specific time and a specific place. And I'm like, I loved it. And not to say I wouldn't perform again, but I don't think I would ever enter into that specific world again, because I wouldn't want to change that.
That makes sense. Also, I think like the way you might immerse yourself as like a student of something, and like when you first start out, is like no matter if you stick with it or not, will never be the same as like when you first were just like, it's kind of like falling in love or something, right?
Yeah.
Like being swept off your feet and just like hitting the throttle as hard as you can. Like there's a time and place for that, and then it's like it doesn't have to be that for you the rest of your life to still enjoy it.
I agree.
And it probably and you're right. I think it probably shouldn't continue to be that.
Right.
You don't want to be that kid who like had a really great time at high school and then like came back to high school all the time afterwards. It's like, no. That had its proper place.
It did. And I think ultimately where IO and that community exists and is so great and so rich is if you think about it like a grad program where you can go and you get your certificate and get out and it has no value. Or you could put as much time and effort into it as you can, and you can use that to create and propel yourself onto something more. And then it is limitless in terms of the potential that it brings you. And so it's all up to you to decide what value you are getting out of an institution like that.
I like that.
Let's drink some whiskey.
Well, let's drink some whiskey. Okay, so this is our second one. What is this again?
So this one's going to be a lot more. This is Elijah Craig Small Batch. This is a 12-year bourbon. Elijah Craig is one of those old brands that have been doing this forever. Elijah Craig, there's provenance and story around this brand being like almost linking it to the idea that they were the ones who accidentally started barreling whiskey. But like I said, a lot of it is like chasing false nostalgia.
Okay.
And so a lot of that, if you think about why we put whiskey in barrels, ultimately it's because it was cheaper to put whiskey into barrels and ship it in barrels to different destinations. And we found that we liked it more after it sat.
Huh.
We learned also from wine that when you toast the inside, different things happen to it. And we found that, it's better that way. enjoying it more and we can charge more for it, and people keep asking about that one, so we kind of naturally tended toward this. There is a pretty romantic story about Elijah Craig being a preacher who accidentally lit all of them on fire, and then was like,
Wait, lit who on fire?
All the barrels.
Oh, okay.
He accidentally lit all the barrels on fire and then said, well, shit, we'll still put the whiskey in it, and then by God, it was good. You know, it's like such a silly story that they kind of latch onto, which really makes no sense.
Yeah.
But there is that narrative that there's this idea in whiskey where it's you create a brand, you attach your identity to someone older than you in a black and white photo until you're old enough to be the one in a black and white photo, and then the story becomes about you.
Okay. Yeah, so
this brand's been around for a while. This is a cask strength 12-year-old bourbon.
Ooh.
That isn't something that you'll see on a shelf very often. This is batch number B517. So that means it's the second batch that came out that year of 4. So second quarter.
Cool.
So 17 means 2017. So this is a March 2017 batch of Elijah Craig 12-year cask strength. So this will be really fun to smell it, take a small sip of it, let it roll, and then we'll add a little bit of water to it.
Cheers.
Yeah.
I already feel like syrupy, like almost like a maple syrup or something from the smell.
Yep.
Woo!
Is that fun?
Whoa! It's like you get a lot more from the taste than you do from the smell.
Yep.
That's like surprising.
And it has a pretty rich nose to it as well.
The nose is really great. Oh my gosh, this is cool.
Elijah Craig low-key puts out a really great cask strength bourbon, and I get really excited about drinking it. Add a drop or two of water.
It's almost like, so I know nothing, so I'm speaking from a not refined palate, but it's almost like smells mapley and like maple syrupy to me, and then I'm expecting something really like, I don't know. I'm thinking in beer terms, like malty or like dark and
sure, and you
caramely, but it comes across. It's like when you pull it through, it's like almost like, is it cherry or what is it? It feels like something's like.
So it's funny. I did a call with Adam Harris, or a Zoom call with Adam Harris, and he is the global senior ambassador for the James B. Beam Distilling Company.
Okay.
So big shot, face of Beam, and he was talking about how every whiskey has a different note, and there's sometimes you chase very specific flavors. He goes, but an elusive flavor that I always love and chase and look for is that like rich cherry flavor.
Is that what that is?
There can be, yeah, and it can vary from whiskey to whiskey or from barrel to barrel, but it's something that is really fun to get that like real cherry note that kind of just bellows throughout it.
This is the most. I'm going to speak hyperbolically right now. I don't know. I'm excited. This might be the best whiskey, or the whiskey that I've enjoyed the most that I've ever had. Like, this is very cool.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I wish you could taste what's running over my tongue, everyone. Incredible.
Is that fun? And
it's real fun.
It mellows out when you add just a drop of water. It mellows out so much. You don't lose the flavor. You kind of lose like the little like peppery spikes at the beginning of it.
Yeah.
But it's almost like candy.
It opens it up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you said earlier?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this about whiskeys. Mm-hmm. So I believe, as I'm starting to get into brewing beer just a little bit, only three batches in right now,
and making good beer. I've enjoyed it so far.
Thanks, I appreciate that. It's been super fun to make. I believe that like in the like home brewing world, you can just buy like wood chips to put into your brew when you're making it to like give it the flavor as if it's been in a barrel or something. Does that ever happen in the whiskey world? Is that like...
So a big thing that...
I guess, is there additives like wood chips or like other things that you would just let sit in there and then pull out?
So the interesting thing, and I'll answer that question in a moment, is the chips is kind of a like starter version of what is being done at a large scale.
See. Yep.
So
that makes sense. Even in the beer world, probably.
Especially in the beer world. So Bourbon County Stout is a stout that is aged in X whiskey barrels. So it's a big, thick beer, and they say that Bourbon County Stout is one of the only beers that's made to not taste good, where they put too much hops in it, too much malt in it, so it's over malted, over hopped, and the idea is that it goes into this barrel and it mellows out. It softens up a lot, and it interacts with the wood, and it absorbs some of that whiskey flavor, and over time you get this like really thick, viscous, delicious beer that is only really possible by sitting in a barrel.
Interesting.
In the whiskey, it is very frowned upon to just add things to it. Excuse me.
Yeah. A little put on.
Yes. And the history of whiskey is definitely fraught with stories of rectifiers and people adding things to it and mixing it with neutral grain spirit and lowering the quality of it. So there are a lot of rules and regulations to be considered a bourbon, for it to be considered bottled and bond, or just to have the correct labels on it. So it's something that whiskey as an entity has been fighting against since the late 1800s. The exception is a brand that does it really well is Maker's Mark. And what they've started doing is this program called Maker's 46, where they're actually adding seasoned staves back into the whiskey afterwards. So
what is this seasoned staves?
So they'll do different staves, but the seasoned staves is kind of a fancy way of saying wood that's been sat outside and dried and taken in some of the elements.
Okay.
So they'll age it with those staves in the barrel. And they have a program where if you wanted to buy your own barrel of Maker's 46, they'd have you come down to the distillery, pick out which wood that you like the most, and then you'd add those staves to the barrel. Oh. So they have like French oak staves, and they have different finish staves. The idea being that
are these breweries coming in, restaurants coming in to do this, or is this like private individuals who are coming in to do it?
So restaurants, bars, liquor stores. If you wanted to go down and spend $14,000 on a barrel, they would let you.
That's how much you got to spend on a barrel
for Maker's Mark. It's a pretty expensive program.
Okay,
but you're also paying for the interaction, which is somewhat unique.
Huh. Cool.
Yeah.
This is just a frickin' delight.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I feel like what proof is this?
This is 124.2 proof.
Okay, so I'm like, I never drink anything that high in alcohol content.
Right.
And there is something fun. I know you said you like stuff that's higher proof. There is something fun about like it forcing you to take your time with it.
Yeah.
A little bit more because it's like, oh, like.
I love a good whiskey that's complex and rich, and you can sip and just like think about the different layers that you're going through. And every sip is a journey where it starts off maybe a little spicy and rich up front, and then goes into that bellowing cherry, and then lingers in a way that kind of rises in temperature down your mouth.
I was getting real hot and bothered as you were talking to me about that. All right. As a whiskey person, like, if you are feeling like you're like, man, I want to have like a really nice glass of whiskey, and I want to match it to the location.
Interesting.
Like, if you're like, yeah, I used to love on Saturday mornings. This is so not classy. Drink like, specifically, it would be like a wheat beer. With an orange in the shower.
Sure.
Like, I feel like that was like my naughty, like fun thing.
Yep.
That like, I'm not going to do this all the time, but like, I don't know why. Like, or like, you know, I think of a porter and I think of like, oh, like by a fireplace or something. Do you have a similar feeling with whiskeys where it's like, this whiskey would be enhanced by a Siberian night. I've just slaughtered an elk.
I think this whiskey is perfect for that moment.
Is it?
Oh man,
Or is it like more like a social like thing? Like you picture yourself like, if I'm really gonna enjoy whiskey, like I'd love to like have whiskey on a date or with friends. Or with other people love it.
Shared experiences are the best.
Yeah.
Like this is better drinking with you than it would be if I was in my room drinking it by myself.
Crying. Playing video games.
Right. Like I think having something awesome. So I've had this since 2017. And obviously I'm not drinking it all the time. And in a moment like this, where it's like, oh, I want to show something fun and cool, this is a great thing to be able to pull out and say, hey, let's drink something cool together.
Dang. Well, I appreciate you pulling it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've listened to John Chesney's podcast, he has a couple different elements in it, both of which I really like. One is problematic Facebook friend.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And the other is like how to, I forget how you frame it, but it's like you give each other a situation of like in Chicago and like how you would fix it or make it better. Yeah.
Yeah. So problematic Facebook friend, we've all got those annoying friends on Facebook who post really dumb shit. And
if you don't, it's you.
Yeah. Then you are doing it.
Yep. You're the one.
Or you've blocked all those people.
Yeah, that's true.
So basically I have a number of friends on my Facebook feed who I will clip their posts and I will share them with Durandal and ask him to either respond, ignore, or block them.
Yes.
So it's pretty fun. I think it's also interesting because I think we all deal with it, so we want to know how do we handle it.
Yeah. Which opens a can of worms, just like in general with social media.
Yep.
Because like I've always kind of like I've tried to figure out my tactic for let's get more theoretical about how to handle news that's negative.
Yep.
And like not to mention like social media that's negative and all that. And over time, I've kind of come to this personal philosophy that I think a lot of people would argue that there's a sense that you ought to be informed and that it is like your duty almost to know the bad news and like to know things like that. I feel like, and I'm interested to hear, because I think a lot of people feel differently. I feel like that imperative is a false imperative and a problematic imperative.
Yep.
Living in a world with 7.5 billion people, the idea that when all the journalists in the world go out and gather the worst news, that you should like be consuming that, and you ought to be as a good civilian of our world, doesn't seem like it's a healthy thing. And it's kind of a false thing too, because one, we have access to more information than we ever did, through our human history. And two, it's purposely curated to grab your attention because in general, anger and outrage and problematic things grab our attention more. I don't know. How do you feel about that when you think about in terms of like Facebook?
So I think there's a lot to unpack in what you said. First off, there is an imperative to stay informed, have an opinion, and speak up to educate others who maybe don't know the things that you know. But
go ahead.
But the problem with that is there is information overload.
Yeah.
And it has never been harder than it is today to find real information.
Poof.
So the barrier to entry to get to normal is higher than it's ever been before. So you have to weed through a lot of Breitbart, and you've got to weed through a lot of MSN. So on both sides of the political spectrum, you're getting a lot of hate and vitriol and just false narratives that you almost have to reset and say, where am I getting my information? Is this just clickbait? Is it a source that I've never heard before that's not really vetting their information? And it goes on both sides, right? Like if you're getting all of your information from MSN, you're probably pretty liberal and not willing to hear a accurate report that's coming out somewhat moderate. But if you're getting all your information from Breitbart or Fox News, on the same regard, you're probably not going to be willing to get to take information from a doctor about COVID very seriously. So I think you have to check your resources or check your sources of information and make sure that you're getting it from places that are somewhat in the middle.
Yeah.
I always try to go back to Reuters because I think that they're pretty, here's the facts, here's the news, here's what's going on. But
Which is, it feels nearly impossible to find
Nearly
information
impossible.
like that, doesn't it?
yes. So we've emboldened a lot of people who've got very surface level information to be very loud.
Yes. And we've emboldened and rewarded those who curate the information and cherry pick the information to create the most exaggerated argument that they want in their narrative.
Well, and also keep in mind, we're in 2020 where the news is happening faster and more viciously than it ever has in the past. We've had, beyond the fact that we're in a pandemic, we have race riots, we have violence, looting, we have a major election on our hands, which we are already looking at how do we delegitimize this election before
We've been talking about this election for 4 years.
And we've got dual hurricanes coming up the Gulf Coast right now.
Damn, I'm uninformed. I didn't know about those hurricanes.
There is, and I don't even get me started on cicadas and murder hornets and the coyotes in Chicago.
What? Wait, what about the cicadas?
Well, we have.
Also, I feel real shitty that I didn't respond about any of those other things. I just didn't know about the cicadas.
There is a cycle of cicadas that are coming into Chicago right now. I thought it was a 17-year cicadas, but I've been corrected by a coworker of mine, and I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong.
Good. That's a good trait to have. I would agree. There's always some level of like you should be informed, and you shouldn't just like go la 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 la, put your fingers in your ear and like plug it all out. But it's also like, because there's so much accessible, and because you're exposed to so much that you don't really have any impact on.
Yep.
It's like, where should a healthy person close that circle in on? You know what I mean? Because I think most of us are living in such a truly unhealthy mindset. We're having arguments with people in our head who aren't even there because we read something on Facebook, or we perceived like, oh man, if I know I spoke to somebody about the news article I just read, they'd probably try to take it this way. And like, we're doing that all day long.
Yep.
I feel like so many of us are. And I truly think that like this is going to be one of the biggest issues that faces us, like on a personal and human and global level.
Yep.
Like in the future is going to be like how we absorb news and information and do all this in our head, and how it affects the world that we interact with.
Yeah.
Because it undoubtedly will, and currently does, and I think it will so even more. The more we like lean into this like left and right and like,
Yeah.
and you know what? Almost everybody knows somewhere like deep in their head when they're making an exaggerated argument that's extremely like biased one way or the other, they could articulate the other side's argument better to make their argument weaker. But we don't do that, right? Like we purposely avoid all the gray all the time.
So a podcast that I really like to listen to is called Hardcore History. It's hosted by Dan Carlin. It's been around for a long time. And he's really great at making these collegiate level thesis statements and asking questions about history and then presenting the answers via a pretty long podcast. And sometimes he'll look at the fall of Rome or World War II. I think one of the episodes that I really liked was who would win in a battle? The people of today or the people of the greatest generation in World War II? Everything else is equal. They have the same equipment. They have the same...
They've been trained on the same equipment?
Trained on the same equipment. Everything else is equal. They have the same planes.
It's like
bombs.
mental fortitude.
That's a part of it, right?
And like how they hinge together as a society is what ends up being in play? Or
Yeah, because if you look at...
this is fun.
In the same regards, if you took two boxers, both same age, same skin color, same weight, training, someone's going to win. At the end of the day, someone's going to win that fight. And what separates them? Is it that mental fortitude? Is it what made them who they are growing up, or who they are that allows them to like reach out for that last hit or take that last hit?
Yeah.
So as a society, would we be able to win in a war?
Absolutely no. We're just getting softer.
But those are some of the topics that he tackles in that podcast. He had an interesting conversation on the media, which is on NPR, where talking about his book that he just came out with, that I think is The End Is Always Nigh, how we're always about to be at the end of the world. If you look at
for evangelical Christians, like the Lord is coming.
It's always in September or something like that.
The rapture's coming tomorrow.
One of the things he said is that we're suffering from right now is just who controls the information, who controls the narrative. And that problem really started in the early 1900s with the creation of the phone. And as soon as information went from being not just I'm telling you something to I could call somebody and tell them that, it started speeding up. And as information speeds up, governments and societies struggle or lag behind with how do they control information to make sure it's either true or fits the narrative that they want to put out there.
It got exasperated by the phone because it was always the case that like withholding information I guess always a power play.
I 100% agree. And I guess my the caveat to that being the technological aspects of information overload.
Yep. It's everything's heightened.
Yeah.
Is there one more whiskey?
There is.
Oh my God.
That was a good deep cut, wasn't it?
That was a good deep cut. Right. I have to check out that podcast. Name that podcast for me again.
Hardcore History.
Hardcore History.
So this is not a whiskey. It is a whiskey, but it's not.
Should I go fresh cup?
Either way. This is a cocktail that I made.
Ooh.
So
Chesney, let's just take a step back one more time.
Yeah.
If people are like, hey, I like fancy things, or I want to get into whiskeys, or I want to like do something with friends or coworkers.
Yep.
How do they contact you to sign up for one of your online events?
Sure. You can find me on Instagram at Chief Whiskey Officer. You can email me at john@slightlytoasted.com. You can reach out to Johnny and say, hey, give me that dude's contact info. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And what's fun about it is like you send them in little tinctures, don't you?
I do. I
love tinctures.
So yeah, we've built our own little kits, so little 2-ounce kits with all the pertinent information about each whiskey. And so then when you get it, it shows up at your door and you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. How fun. And then we, via Zoom call, walk you through each tasting. And either it becomes this conversation for an hour or so where we just nerd out, or it can be something where if you have more of a professional setting and you want to have a structured conversation, you can use it as something to be the skeletal system of that conversation.
Mm-hmm. And if someone's like going through a divorce, will you talk through that too?
I'll talk them down.
Okay, good.
We'll get through it.
Okay, good.
I'll bring the whiskey.
Man, what a good man. So this is a cocktail you made?
So this is interesting. This is one of my favorite cocktails I've ever made. It is an old fashioned.
Okay.
So I love taking super basic recipes and then showcasing either a whiskey or putting it in wood and seeing what happens. So we were talking about the Bourbon County Stout, and you asked about adding wood chips. I'm a really big fan of secondary aging in oak barrels.
Okay.
So I buy a lot of private barrels from distilleries, and one of the ones,
Are these full-size barrels or are they smaller barrels?
That's a great question. So Journeyman will actually distill their whiskey in 5-gallon barrels, 15, 30, and 53. The 5-gallon allows the whiskey to mature a lot faster. So I can get a 5-gallon bourbon barrel and then finish an old-fashioned in a bourbon barrel. So I have a bourbon barrel finished old-fashioned, which is pretty fun.
Yeah.
And if there's some unique characteristics on that private barrel, that will come through in the cocktail as well. So I've had an entirely wheated whiskey where the only ingredient was wheat.
Wheated?
Wheat.
Oh, wheat. Okay.
Yeah. So like the entire mash bill is wheat. On the nose, it was just this amazing maple syrup smell. And what was fun was when I put a cocktail into that, you still got all the flavors of that cocktail, but the nose of that maple syrup came through on it too. It'll change the complexity. It'll bring out other rich flavors. It'll soften some of the more harsher ones. So this one is kind of a next level one. In October, I took one of those barrels and I filled it with Amontillado sherry. And I just let it sit in there for 4 months. And then the day that we literally shut down Slightly Toasted, one of the last things I did
because of the pandemic
was I emptied out that Amontillado sherry and I filled it with an E.H. Taylor bonded old fashioned. So it's this 100 proof high rye, delicious bonded bourbon made into an old fashioned that aged in a sherry barrel for the entirety of lockdown. And the day that I came back to Slightly to board up the windows because of the riots, we were all in like such like a pissy mood and angry. And I went to the barrel and had a little tap on it, and I poured a little bit into a glass, and I couldn't just help myself but smile and kind of giggle. I'm like, this is so fucking
And
good.
how long had it been in at that point?
At that point, it had been in there for 3 months, and I let it age for probably another month and a half.
What was your actual plan going into it? How long were you going to let it age?
I like the natural story of it was down there for as long as we were in lockdown. So I figured like if it was 2 weeks, 2 weeks. But if we were there for 4 months, which we were, it was 4 months.
Huh. Cheers.
Cheers.
That is so good.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah, it's nice and like it's got like a nice sweetness to it too.
Mm-hmm. And there's the sherry brings this like really rich nuttiness in the end.
I don't know what I'm actually saying right now, but it's hitting me all over the tongue from the tip to the back, right up into the nose. It's like got a lot of flavors going on.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's really complex and really fun. And
complex is a good way to say that, huh?
Yeah.
Hitting your tongue from the tip to the back. That's the more elegant way to say it.
Well, that just sounds like a rap song, which I would listen to.
From the tip to the back. Oh my God. All right. Man, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
But I also feel like maybe we should wrap it up.
Well, here's the thing. We also, since you've asked me to do this, we've had so many false starts with conversations. So now we've got all this built up. Oh, wait, save it for the podcast. Save it for the podcast.
Yeah.
Now we've got all this built up conversation that we've like, yeah.
All right, well, I'll have to have you back. I'm trying to be mindful of the time limit. This has been a fucking delight, Chesney.
Hell yeah.
Also, like, we haven't sat down for an hour and just chit-chatted.
No, we're both pretty busy dudes.
Yeah. So what a delight. Thank you so much for these drinks.
Yeah.
If you would like to have this man in your living room, you actually can.
Yeah.
On a screen.
Yep.
And yeah, he would guide you and friends through this whiskey drinking experience.
Yeah, and we actually
very cool.
We can actually do actual private events at Slightly Toasted for much cheaper than we could have at any other time. So my brother and his family, or my brother and his good friend's bachelor party is coming to Chicago next week, and we're basically doing a 10-person private event at Slightly Toasted because right now we can afford to do that, and no other time could we.
That's amazing. So if you need this for some downtime with some coworkers and you want to be the coolest boss in the world, plan this, or just the coolest employee in the world, or a bachelor party or bachelorette party or whatever, get a hold of John Chesney. Again, how do we get a hold of you?
Your fastest way will be to reach out through Johnny, but you can find me at Chief Whiskey Officer on Instagram, or my email is john@slightlytoasted.
Hell yeah. Also, check out We Can Do Better podcast.
Yes, sir. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We have a Buzzsprout, so you can find us at wcdb.buzzsprout.com. We're also on Instagram at Mayor Chesney.
.com, I thought you said, but you said com. John, what a delight. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Cheers, bud.
Cheers.
Dance to the middle of the night. Come on, dance. Wake up the